However, there are a number of institutions that still remain to be established, because without these institutions the system cannot work effectively. In fact, one of the reasons why we have not been able to make much progress in the direction of our vision, is the absence of many of these institutions. Like, for instance, the Sharia courts or banking tribunals. If a person who has received funds on profit and loss sharing basis or mudarba and musharaka basis tries to cheat the bank, then it should be possible for the bank to take the case to a Sharia court or a banking tribunal and get a verdict quickly, not after several years as it is the case now, but within a matter of a few weeks. Such institutions do not exist, and therefore if a person tries to cheat, we don't have any quick means of recovering our funds. Also, there are no depositors associations, because in an Islamic financial system, the investment depositor participates in the risk, just like shareholders. But the shareholders are able to attend the shareholders meetings, but the depositors cannot. And even if they were allowed to, it would be almost useless, because even shareholders are not able to attend these meetings. They may be far apart, but they are much fewer than depositors. So if the shareholders do not attend these meetings, then how will the depositors attend, who are much larger in number? So what do we do? How we have the depositors represented in the shareholders meetings or the board meetings? Well, the best thing to do would be to have depositors associations, and this association will send a member to board meetings as well as shareholder meetings to represent the cause of the depositors. There is also no Supreme Sharia board. There are Sharia boards in every bank. The verdicts of many of these are not transparent, and moreover, if anybody wants to challenge the verdict of any of these Sharia boards, there is no place to go to. There should be a Supreme Sharia board where you can challenge the verdict of any of these Sharia boards and get a decision. There is no such board, and the Sharia boards are able to do what they want. Of course, I don't mean that there is no integrity on their part. All of them have integrity, but of course they also have human failings, and they may give a verdict which may be true to form but not to substance. This has of course been a big problem, because the verdicts of the Sharia boards have to be true not only to form but also to substance. The verdicts should be such that they do not violate the maqasid al-Sharia. We'll come to this after a little while. There should be chartered Sharia advisors, chartered Sharia, just like the accounts auditors, chartered Sharia auditors, and these do not exist. While the accounts of banks are audited properly, there is nobody to see whether the banks have been conducting their business in accordance with the teachings of the Sharia. There should be some organization which does this. At the moment, the Sharia advises how to do this, but they cannot do it because there are so many branches of banks and it is impossible for them. There are only 4 or 5 Sharia advisors in a bank and they can't go to all these branches and examine the transactions of the bank to ensure that these are in accordance with the teachings of the Sharia. There is also no lender of last resort for Islamic banks. So there are a number of institutions, I have mentioned only a few of them, that need to be established, but they do not exist. Then we have look at the shortcomings of Islamic financial institutions. One of these is that there is inadequate expansion so far. According to available statistics, the total financing of Islamic banks does not exceed more than 1% of the total financing provided by all banks around the world. This is a very small proportion, small share, and it is not enough to be able to play any significant role in the international financial system. In fact, they constitute even a small share of the total deposits and advances of their own countries, leave alone the whole world. So another thing about related to expansion is that most of these banks are very small, and the smaller they are, the greater is the chance of being vulnerable. If there is a big crisis, the small banks generally go down faster than the bigger banks, who are able to support themselves because of their larger resources. And the small banks are not also able to get for themselves the most competent people, because the salaries they can offer are not competitive in the world market. There is inadequate movement in the direction of mudaraba and musharaka, the profit and loss sharing that Islam wishes to bring about in the financial system. There is inadequate movement in this direction. And of course, we can't blame the banks for this, because as I have already indicated, the institutions that you need for mudaraba and musharaka and profit and loss sharing work effectively, such institutions do not exist. And until we establish them, people would be reluctant to go in this direction. Therefore, there is primary reliance on the asset-based debt-creating modes of finance. This is because Islam is realistic and it has not closed the door for debt financing. Every financial need cannot be covered by mudaraba, musharaka and profit and loss sharing. Therefore, there will be places where the financing has to be done through debt. But here Islam has put a restriction, and this is that there cannot be direct lending and borrowing. The debt is created through the purchase and sale of goods and services, not through direct lending and borrowing. Why this restriction? Well, this is because if you can lend or borrow directly without any relationship with the real economy, then there can be an excessive expansion of debt. This is one of the reasons for crises in the conventional financial system. A number of scholars have indicated, among them even Professor Galbraith and Mrs. Joan Robinson and others, that equity is better than debt, but of course it cannot be avoided. there has to be debt financing, and this uh, there has been excessive expansion of debt around the world because there are no conditions laid down for debt financing. Islam has laid down a number of conditions for debt financing, and one of these is that there must be a purchase and sale transaction. You cannot get money directly, but you have to purchase something or sell something to create debt. And there are other conditions which I indicated in an earlier lecture of mine, and I did not go into that here. So, the primary reliance is on debt financing, and this has raised criticism of the system by many scholars. Since every effort is also being made to pass the risk entirely to the borrower or the lessee, a number of people find that there is not too much difference between the conventional system and the financial system. There is excessive use of hilas or legal contrivances to bypass the Sharia rulings. This may be acceptable in the short run, but measures need to be taken to cure the situation. And this is because the hilas or the legal contrivances are true to the form but not to the substance. I mean, to give you an example from prayers, in prayers both are necessary, just like in finance. If a person prays in such a way that his qiyam is all right, and his ruku and sujood are all right, and tashahhud is all right, well, he has fulfilled the form requirement of prayers. But what he says and how much attention he pays to God himself while performing these form requirements, we do not know. If he does not do this, then there is his prayer has some fault in it. If the prayer is good in both senses, then only it will be helpful in realizing the goal, which according to the Quran is inna salata tanha anil fahsha'i wal munkar. That prayer takes you away from bad things and from evil things and bad observances like telling lies, cheating, all these things. A person who prays in the real sense has to be away from these things. But if his prayer is not in the right sense, then he cannot. If it's not true in form as well as substance, then it is not acceptable. So this is the case. I mean, there is inadequate expansion, inadequate movement in the direction of equity, and primary reliance on debt creating modes of finance. So now we come to this to the challenges for the future. One of the most important challenges is to fulfill international standards with respect to capital adequacy, risk management, corporate governance, transparency, and market discipline. The supervisory process has also to be effective and efficient. This is important because there are a number of rules laid down by the Basel framework and also by the Islamic Financial Services Board, and these observance of these effectively would would help us gain respectability for the Islamic financial system.